If you're going to spy on your neighbors, at least try not to point the camera straight into their bedroom. That thought crossed my mind the morning I first noticed Karen's new security system. At first, I tried to ignore it. Cameras are everywhere these days, but something about this one felt wrong. The lens wasn't watching her driveway or front yard. It was aimed directly at my house like a silent glass eye observing everything I did. The next morning confirmed my suspicion. As sunlight poured through my kitchen window, something outside caught my attention. Across the fence, the tiny camera lens reflected the morning light, like it was staring back at me. Karen had mounted it perfectly across from my kitchen window. Suddenly, my home didn't feel private anymore. A few days later, another camera appeared. This one aimed straight toward my backyard patio. That's when I stopped pretending it was coincidence. Instead of marching over and starting a fight, I decided to be smarter about it. I pulled out my phone and began documenting everything. Photos from different angles, videos showing the direction of the cameras. I filmed from my patio, my kitchen window, even my bedroom. Frame by frame, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Then one evening, Karen marched across the yard like she owned the entire neighborhood. Arms crossed, chin lifted. "Those cameras are for security," she snapped. "You should be grateful someone here actually cares about protecting this community." I simply smiled and nodded politely. Because what Karen didn't realize was that aiming surveillance cameras directly into someone's private living space isn't security. It's a privacy violation. And by the time she finished her speech, the footage was already on its way to a lawyer. If you love powerful stories, you don't want to miss this. But before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. It makes us happy to see how far our stories travel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. The next morning, I woke up to something even more ridiculous. Taped neatly to my front door was a bright yellow HOA notice. According to Karen, I was violating community guidelines by filming her property. She claimed my phone recordings were harassment and demanded I delete the footage immediately. I actually laughed out loud standing on my porch. Later that afternoon, Karen strutted across the street again, this time holding a clipboard like some kind of neighborhood sheriff. "Recording my house is illegal," she declared loudly enough for the nearby neighbors to hear. "If you don't stop, I'll report you to the HOA board." I calmly leaned against my fence and let her finish her performance. Then I asked one simple question. "Karen, do you know where your cameras are pointing?" For the first time, she hesitated, only for a second. But it was enough. Because while Karen had been busy threatening me, I had already emailed the photos, videos, and timestamps to a lawyer who specialized in privacy law. By that evening, a certified letter had been drafted. And the next morning, it arrived at Karen's door. The envelope was thick, official, and stamped with the words, "Legal Notice," across the front. Neighbors watched from their windows as she opened it. Her confident smile disappeared almost instantly. By the next evening, Karen was no longer marching around the neighborhood like a sheriff. Instead, she was knocking on doors, one by one. I watched from my window as she nervously spoke to a few neighbors, waving her hands while pointing toward my house. Whatever story she was telling them, it clearly wasn't going the way she expected. Because the HOA board had already received a copy of the lawyer's letter. 2 days later, an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled. Apparently, Karen had tried to convince the board that I was harassing her by filming her property. But when the meeting started, my lawyer calmly placed printed photos on the table. Each one clearly showed Karen's cameras aimed directly into my windows and backyard. The room went quiet. One board member leaned forward and asked the question Karen had been avoiding the entire time. "Why exactly are your cameras pointed at your neighbor's bedroom window?" Karen tried to explain it was for security, but even she sounded unsure. Another board member pointed out that if a privacy lawsuit moved forward, the HOA itself could be dragged into court. That's when Karen finally realized something. Her cameras weren't protecting the neighborhood. They were about to cost her a lot of money. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. 3 days after the HOA meeting, Karen's cameras disappeared. Not quietly either. A small crew showed up early in the morning with ladders and tool belts while several curious neighbors watched from their driveways. One by one, the cameras were unscrewed and lowered into a cardboard box. Karen stood nearby with her arms folded. refusing to make eye contact with anyone. But removing the cameras wasn't the worst part for her. The lawyer's letter had given her two choices: remove the cameras immediately and settle the privacy violation claim, or face a lawsuit that could drag the HOA into court. Karen chose the cheaper option. Still, the settlement cost her thousands of dollars in legal fees and damages. The neighborhood definitely noticed the change. Karen, who once patrolled the streets like she owned them, suddenly kept to herself. No more clipboard, no more shouting across fences, and definitely no more lectures about protecting the community. Every time we crossed paths, she walked a little faster and looked at the ground. A week later, I sat peacefully on my patio drinking coffee again. For the first time in weeks, my backyard finally felt private. And the only thing watching the neighborhood now was the quiet lesson Karen learned the hard way. If someone installs cameras pointing into your home, document everything. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting. It's letting the law do the talking. Share this story with your loved ones and tell us where you're watching from. It makes us happy to see how far our stories travel. Please like, comment, and subscribe.